The wind came hard off the mountains that morning, cold as iron and scented with cedar. A woman in a threadbare dress stood alone on the edge of a ridge, her silhouette stark against the sweep of sage and frost-bitten brush below. She carried no bundle, no name she was willing to give, and only the dust on her hem hinted at the miles behind her. Her hands were raw, the nails split. She kept them folded together like prayer. From afar she might have been mistaken for a boy, her hair cut short, her frame thin and square-shouldered from years of labor. But the set of her mouth, the haunted inwardness of her eyes, betrayed a different truth, one she didn't offer freely. The caravan came into view just after sunup, 30-odd wagons winding like bone-white ribs across the plateau. Oxen plodded steady, children's voices drifted through the brittle air, and women in long dresses carried tin kettles and quilts in the crooks of their arms. The group moved with the solemn rhythm of pilgrims, driven less by hope than by the memory of places that had failed them. She approached just before the noon halt, stepping into the edge of the procession with the silent audacity of someone who no longer expected to be refused. A young elder, barely more than a boy himself, caught sight of her and trotted over with the polite suspicion of someone raised on the difference between lost and dangerous. "You alone, brother?" he asked, glancing at the knife on her belt. She lowered her eyes. "My kin died of fever," she said, voice dry from disuse. "Been walking since Canesville." He squinted, the wind tugged at his hat, and he reached up to steady it. "You Mormon." "I was baptized," she said, neither lie nor truth. After a moment he gave a reluctant nod. "Elder Price will talk to you, he'll decide." He led her through the ranks toward the heart of the caravan, where a canvas-topped wagon bore the markings of some spiritual authority. Inside sat a man with a hawk's profile and silver in his beard, Elder Price. He listened to her quiet account with narrowed eyes, hands folded on a worn leather-bound book. When she was done, he nodded once and turned away. That was all the approval she would get. She was given no wagon, only a place among the walking women. They eyed her with quiet curiosity, but none asked questions. Among Mormons, everyone was running from something. Polygamy, persecution, debts, or disgrace, sins varied, but silence was the same currency. It wasn't until the third day on the trail that she felt his eyes on her. He was tall, weather-worn, and rode a chestnut horse with an easy looseness in the saddle. Not an elder, but not green either. He kept to himself, rode perimeter. His face was plain except for the scar that cut across his jaw, white against sun-browned skin. His gaze wasn't the kind that wandered, it saw. She felt it when he passed, though he never slowed or spoke, just a flick of his eyes, sharp and unsettling. That night she camped with the unmarried women near the creek's edge. She built her own fire, small and blue, barely enough to warm her fingers. The others chattered softly, sharing bread and rumor. She stayed apart, her back to the group. She thought of the man in the saddle. How he'd look straight through her when others looked away. A woman with a milk-blonde braid approached then, offering a biscuit. "You from Iowa?" she asked. "You look like Iowa." She shook her head, farther east. The woman smiled. "Don't matter. We're all westbound now." When she turned back toward the fire, the man with the scar was gone, lost in the dark beyond the creek. But she felt it again, the weight of being seen. It tightened something in her chest she hadn't let herself feel in months. That night, sleep came hard. In dreams, her past clawed its way up like weeds through frostbitten soil, blood in the snow, a man's ring heavy on her finger, a door left swinging in the wind. She woke before dawn and packed her things in silence. She had joined them to disappear. But someone already knew she wasn't who she claimed to be. Morning came pale and slow, a veil of mist hanging low along the flats. The caravan stirred in soft murmurs, boots crunching frost-bitten grass, iron kettles clinking over fire. She moved among them with practiced quiet, the way feral things do when learning to walk with herds. The man with the scar was already mounted, his silhouette cut clean against the eastern sky. He didn't speak to her, just tipped his hat as he passed. That morning, she didn't return the gesture. Her guard was still up, and she was still counting exits. They moved westward, the trail narrowing into a canyon where the rocks pressed in tight and red. The wagons creaked, wheels biting into dirt that had dried into ruts sharp as old bone. Somewhere in the narrowest bend, one of the oxen stumbled and collapsed. The caravan halted, voices raised in frustration, and Elder Price sent men forward to assess the trouble. She took the moment to slip away up the ridge, needing breath, needing distance. But before she reached the crest, the sound of hooves followed. She turned, and there he was again, rider and horse dark against the sandstone. "You always climb when things get tight?" he asked, voice low, not unkind. She shrugged. "Don't like crowds." He nodded slowly, dismounting. His boots left prints in the thin crust of dust. "You got a name. Not one that matters now. Suit yourself." He crouched beside a scrub juniper, pulling a twig between his fingers. "But I seen you wrap your hands like a ranch hand, not a wagon woman. Seen the way you got a fish, too, quick, precise." She turned her face toward the valley below. "That a crime now?" "No, just don't match the story you told Price." She looked at him then, the wind lifting strands of her cropped hair. "You going to tell him?" "No," he rose, brushing dust from his coat. "But I want to know what you're running from." She didn't answer. He didn't press. That night the firelight cast shadows like ghosts on the canvas walls of the nearest wagon. She sat on a rock, mending a tear in her hem with thick thread. The others were singing, a low hymn, the kind meant to make sorrow feel like salvation. She didn't join. She hadn't sung in years. The man with the scar didn't sleep among the others. He stayed at the perimeter, close to the horses. A sentinel, or maybe a self-imposed exile. She watched him sometimes when she thought no one else could see. By the sixth day, they crossed into drier country, the kind where wind never rested, and the only shade came from rocks shaped by centuries of sun. The wagon behind hers lost a wheel on a sharp incline, and the child riding inside was thrown hard. She ran before the mother could scream, cradling the boy's head in her lap, pressing her hand to a bleeding temple. She moved like someone who'd done it before. The others saw it too, how fast, how sure. Later, the boy's mother approached her with trembling thanks. "You a healer?" she asked. "No," she said, "just fast hands." But word spread. After that, people looked at her differently, some with gratitude, others with quiet worry. That night, the man with the scar found her sitting beside the stream again. The water glinted silver in the moonlight. He crouched near her, not close enough to spook her, just near enough for the truth to travel. "You were a midwife, maybe," he said, "or something close." She didn't speak for a long time. The wind rustled dry cottonwood leaves. "I was married," she said finally, voice brittle as bark. "I wore white once, had a house with a porch and plum trees. And nothing, he's dead." "How?" She looked up at the stars. "The kind of way that makes you leave town with blood on your shoes." He didn't move, didn't flinch. "You think I'm dangerous?" she asked. "No, I think you're tired." She laughed then, dry and joyless. "That's the truest thing I've heard in years." He stood, the moonlight catching the pale line of his scar. "You can ride with me tomorrow, if you want." Then he left, and she sat there long after the fire had gone cold, thinking of plum trees and porch steps, and how long it had been since someone had offered her anything without asking for something in return. She did not sleep easy that night, but in the morning she took the offer. By the seventh day, the land had flattened into plains so wide it seemed the world had been scraped bare. The grass grew thin, yellowed by drought, and the sky stretched overhead like a taut canvas, colorless and without mercy. Dust clung to her throat and settled in her boots, but riding gave her legs a rest, and for the first time in months, her thoughts drifted toward something other than escape. The man with the scar, his name was Asa, said little as they rode. His horse, an old gelding named Thorn, responded to him with quiet familiarity. He carried a rifle strapped to his saddle and a worn satchel that never left his side. Every movement he made was efficient, like someone who'd learned not to waste more than necessary. By midday, a dust storm swept up from the south, fast and mean. The sky turned ochre, and the wind howled like some ancient thing unloosed. Shouts went up from the caravan, "Cover the children. Secure the wagons." She followed Asa without hesitation as he steered his horse toward higher ground, searching for a hollow or ridge that could offer shelter. They found it in a break of land, a narrow depression lined with juniper. They slid from their saddles, and he tethered Thorn while she covered her mouth with a handkerchief. Together, they hunkered beneath a split boulder, the storm raging around them. They didn't speak for a long while. Dust hissed across stone, and the world shrank to the sound of breath and grit. When the worst had passed, she leaned back against the rock, eyes closed, shoulders trembling with exhaustion. Asa reached into his coat and pulled out a canteen. He passed it without a word. She drank, coughed, then passed it back. You always find the right spot. Only when someone's watching. That made her smile, faint and fleeting. Back at the caravan, a wagon had overturned, and a mare had bolted in the confusion. The child she'd saved earlier stood barefoot in the dirt, face streaked with tears. She helped calm him again, wrapping his foot in cloth where it had been scraped. Later that evening, Asa offered her a tin plate from his pack, beans and jerky, nothing special, but the gesture left her quiet. You don't ask questions, she said. I've seen what questions can cost. She studied him. You're not running. He considered that, eyes on the fire. No, I stopped a long time ago, but I remember what it felt like. The quiet stretched between them again, not awkward, but wide like the plains around them. That night she dreamed not of blood or doors or snow, but of a porch with a creaking swing and a low sun filtering through plum branches. She woke before dawn with tears on her cheeks and a new ache beneath her ribs. As the days stretched on, a rhythm settled in. She rode beside Asa during the heat, helped the sick in the evenings. Once, a woman gave birth early in the night, and the cries brought the caravan to stillness. She didn't hesitate, stepping into the wagon with blood-soaked hands and unflinching eyes. The child came small and quiet, but alive. When she stepped out, sweat clinging to her temples, the group looked at her differently. Not with suspicion now, but reverence. She didn't want it, but she didn't reject it either. Asa didn't say a word, just handed her a tin cup of water and sat beside her in the grass. They didn't speak until dawn. One afternoon, as they approached a bend in the trail, she saw a figure on horseback waiting in the distance. Not one of theirs. A lone man, watching, her stomach turned. Asa saw him too. His hand rested on his rifle. The man turned and rode away before they reached him, but it left something cold in her chest. That night she told Asa the truth, not all of it, but enough. There was a man, she said, voice low, steady. He had a temper. The kind that doesn't show until doors are closed. Asa's jaw tensed. He didn't leave bruises, not always, just marks on things, walls, animals, me sometimes. She didn't say the rest. That she'd buried a knife in him the night he turned on her sister. That she ran before the law could ask questions she wouldn't survive answering. That her name back east was written on a wanted notice, folded and faded in a sheriff's drawer. She said none of that, only, I thought I could disappear. Asa didn't look away. You still can, but not alone. She nodded, the wind cool against her face. The caravan moved west. And though the trail grew harder and her secrets heavier, she no longer carried them by herself. By the time they reached the dry riverbed, the sun had bleached the sky to a pale silver, and the ground cracked like old pottery under their boots. Water was scarce now. The cattle drank from canvas troughs, and the children's lips cracked until their laughter turned to silence. In that silence, she found a kind of kinship, pain that had no language but still shaped everything it touched. She had taken to riding slightly ahead of the caravan, scouting with Asa. Their words remained few, but she'd begun to understand the things he didn't say. How he always positioned himself downwind when they made camp, listening for things others ignored. How he touched the worn leather of his satchel at night like a talisman, something precious in there, maybe letters or a relic of the war he never spoke of. They found bones some mornings. Not human but close enough, sun-bleached ribcage of buffalo, old campsites where ashes still whispered of fire. She watched him study the signs like scripture, always searching for danger, and danger came. It was 3 days past the salt flat when the rider returned. He didn't hide this time, didn't keep to the distance, just sat atop his gelding on a rise to the north, watching the wagons roll. She froze mid-stride, breath catching as if the wind had turned to glass inside her lungs. Asa saw it too. He nudged his horse forward, rifle already loose in the scabbard. She grabbed his arm before he could ride off. I know that man. His eyes stayed on the rider. He law. No, worse. She didn't have to say more. The man vanished before they reached him, but the air shifted afterward. The wagons rolled quieter. The women looked over their shoulders more. At night the fires were built smaller. Asa began sleeping near her tent. He said it was for the horses. She didn't argue. One night lightning bloomed far on the horizon, blue and silent, followed by the scent of rain that never came. She sat by the fire, her shoulders hunched, rubbing salve into her palms. The calluses had split open again. Asa sat beside her, tossing twigs into the flame. "He hurt your sister?" he asked without looking at her. She nodded. "Did he die?" "I don't know, I left him breathing, but I took the knife with me." Asa's face didn't change, but she saw the slow breath he let out. "You want to keep running." She stared into the fire until the heat blurred her vision. "I don't know what else to do." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a folded cloth. Inside was a tin badge, worn and dulled, the kind that once pinned a man to law. "I did my share of running, too," he said. "But at some point, I had to choose what I wanted to be, not what they told me I was." She looked at him then, truly looked. Not just the scar or the guarded posture, but the quiet steadiness beneath it. A man shaped by losses he'd never voice. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "Because someone helped me once, and because you look like you might still want to live." The fire popped, sending sparks into the dark. That night a coyote's cry cut through the silence. Not far, not near, but close enough to remind them that they were never alone out here. In the morning, the rider had left something. A red cloth tied to a mesquite branch, fluttering like blood on the wind. Asa stood beside her watching it. Neither spoke, but they both knew what it meant. The past wasn't done chasing her yet. They buried the cloth in silence. No prayers, no scripture, just earth and Asa's steady hand packing dust over stone. The desert wind carried the rest away, as if the land itself didn't want the omen near. The caravan moved more cautiously after that. Watches were doubled. Fires burned lower. Children were kept inside wagons at dusk. Elder Price, slow to trust, finally pulled Asa aside and asked if danger followed them. Asa didn't lie, but he didn't name names either. The elder nodded and assigned him full scout duty. She stayed close now, riding behind the front wagons, eyes on every distant shape. The others noticed her vigilance. Whispers spread, but no one confronted her. There was something in her bearing now that asked not for approval, but for space. That night, she and Asa camped away from the main group, near a dry arroyo scattered with rabbit brush and thorn. The moon was high, casting silver shadows over the land. Asa was tending to Thorn's hoof when she sat down nearby, watching his movements. "Tell me about the man who helped you," she said. He didn't look up. "Marshall down in Texas," he said. "Took me in when I was 17, found me in a jail cell. I'd done something stupid, thought I was getting hanged. He saw something else, made me ride with him for a year." "What happened?" "He got killed, left me the badge." She nodded. "You ever wear it?" "Once." "Silence, would you again?" she asked. Asa looked at her finally, something unreadable in his face. "Only if I thought it'd do some good." The wind shifted. They both felt it. She stood. "Come morning, I'm going to tell Price the truth." Asa rose slowly. "You sure?" "No, but if this ends in blood, I want them to know what they're standing in." The confession came just after dawn. Elder Price gathered the wagon captains and stood before the others while she spoke, clear, dry-voiced, unflinching. She named the man who might be hunting her, named her own actions with plain honesty. Said she wouldn't blame them if they sent her away. No one spoke when she finished. A few women clutched their children. One man crossed himself, but it was Elder Price who broke the silence. "We are a people of second chances," he said, eyes on the horizon. "We are also a people of judgment, but we cannot have one without the other." He looked at her long and hard. "You'll stay. But if blood comes, it's yours to answer for." She bowed her head, understood. After that, she worked harder than anyone, tended the sick, dug fire pits, repaired broken harnesses. Slowly, suspicion gave way to quiet acceptance, not trust. Not yet, but no longer fear. That evening, Asa handed her the badge. "Keep it for now," he said. "Might be time you carried something heavier than your past." She turned the metal in her palm. It felt cold and right. 2 nights later the man arrived. No warning this time, just a gunshot at midnight and screams. The wagons scattered like frightened cattle. Asa was already running when the second shot came. She followed, heart pounding, badge clutched in one hand, pistol in the other. They found the man near the supply wagon, his face half shadowed by firelight, pistol raised. He was older than she remembered, meaner, thinner, but the eyes were the same. "I knew I'd find you," he said, grinning. Asa stepped between them, rifle leveled. "You'll lower that weapon," Asa said, voice calm as stone. The man laughed. "Who are you to tell me what to do? I'm the man who's not going to let you hurt anyone else." She stepped forward then, placing a hand on Asa's shoulder. Not to hold him back, to steady herself. "You came all this way," she said to the man, "but there's nothing left of me for you to ruin." His grin faltered. "What I did," she continued, voice clear, "was to survive. And I'm done apologizing for that." He raised the gun, too slow. Asaf fired. The man dropped like a felled tree. It was over in seconds. The others gathered slowly, sleep-stunned and silent. Elder Price stepped forward, looked at the body, then at her. "You'll need to bury this one, too," he said. She nodded, and she did, with Asa's help. The grave was shallow, the prayers few. But this time, when they turned from the site, she didn't feel like something was chasing her. She felt like something had finally let go. The grave settled into the earth without protest, the stones laid flat, unmarked. The desert took back the man without question, and she did not speak his name again. What was buried stayed buried, not only in the ground, but in her chest where his shadow had lived too long. The caravan moved on. With the threat gone, the pace softened. Spring grasses began to show in patches along the trail, green shoots brave enough to push through crusted soil. The wind smelled different now, less of dust and more of change. At night the coyotes still called, but their cries no longer turned her blood to ice. Children came to her now with scraped knees and curious questions. Women brought her their aching hands and tired backs. She stitched. She listened. And the wagon folk who had once given her distance now gave her nods, then smiles, then stories of their own. Asa rode beside her most days, and something passed between them that needed no naming. In the way he steadied her horse without touching the reins, in how she handed him water before he asked, a rhythm was building, slow and true. Like water carving stone, patient and unrelenting. One night a child tugged on her sleeve and asked if she had a husband waiting west. She paused before answering. "No," she said, voice soft, "but I've come to understand I don't need one to be whole." The child nodded like she understood more than most. That same night, Asa handed her a folded map, corners frayed from years of handling. "This trail ends soon," he said, eyes on the fire. "Salt Lake's a few weeks off. They'll settle. Find churches, build fences." She traced a river line with her thumb. "And you?" "I'm not much for fences." He glanced at her then. "You?" She didn't answer right away. The fire cracked. An owl called from a cottonwood branch. "I never thought about what came next," she said. "Only what I had to outrun. But now maybe a cabin, land I can call my own, a place where no one owns me." Asa nodded. "There's a valley I know, north of the Uintas, timber, good water." "Quiet." She looked at him then, long and searching. "You asking?" "I'm not asking anything," he said. "I'm offering." Spring unfurled in small ways. Calves were born, trees budded. The river crossings ran stronger with meltwater. Her hair grew longer, curling at the ends. She stopped wrapping her chest so tightly. No one questioned it. When they reached the mouth of Emigration Canyon and the long valley of Salt Lake stretched out before them, the caravan paused. Tears were shed, songs were sung, people embraced and spoke of home with the kind of aching joy that felt earned. She stood apart with Asa, overlooking the basin. "You ready?" he asked. She turned to him, the wind playing through the edge of her dress. "I think I've been ready longer than I knew." They left the next morning, 2 horses, a small wagon, and no map except the ones in their heads. The trail north was harder, lonelier, but it was theirs. They found the valley as he promised. High meadows, a creek thick with trout, aspen groves that shimmered like coins in the wind. They built with their hands, slow and careful, first a shelter, then a cabin, then a fence not to keep things out, but to mark a place as sacred. She planted plum trees, not because she missed the old life, but because something in her still believed in blossoms after frost. In time, the scars faded, not disappeared, but softened. And though neither of them ever used words like love or forever, every morning when she found the fire already lit and coffee waiting in the tin, she understood what they'd built. It wasn't rescue, it was recognition. And that, she knew now, was more than enough.